You're live.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Free Assange Online Vigil. This is week 64. We are joined today with a very special guest. It is Mimi, also known on Twitter as Syrian Girl. And I do have co-host Steve Poikinen with me as well. Before we do kick off, though, I want to run through some numbers. Today is day 3,578 of the illegal and arbitrary detention of Julian Assange. It is day 532 since Julian was trafficked out of the Ecuadorian embassy to Belmarsh prison following a $4.2 billion international monetary loan fund to the nation of Ecuador. Julian was held without arrest from June 24th, 2020 until he was rearrested at the beginning of his second round of extradition hearings on September 7th, 2020 under the new superseding indictment from Bill Barr's Department of Justice. Today was the second day of the third week of the second phase of Julian's extraordinary rendition. We have 1,208 days of incarceration in federal custody for Reality Winner. But in good news, it is day 189 of freedom for Chelsea Manning. She does do a Twitch stream Thursdays through Sunday. I believe it's 7 to 11 Eastern time. So I'd recommend going and checking that out. She is XYChelsea87 on Twitch. But without any further ado, how are you today, Steve?
I'm tired, Andrew. I'm tired. I slept like shit. And then we were up at, I was up at like 2:30-ish this morning. And by the way, guys, we're doing live coverage of every scrap of information we can get about Julian Assange's hearing from around the time it starts until at least through the lunch break.
Yeah.
And Kevin Gostola has joined us now a couple of times. Mohammed El-Mazi popped in this morning. It's always good to talk to Mo. And these are the people that have access to the cloud video platform. So it's as close to watching it as we can legally get away with. And it's made for, I think, some fairly good conversation and analysis, and I will be up earlier with stronger coffee tomorrow morning. I promise.
So I would like to say hello to you, Mimi. How's everything going over for you today?
It's great to be here with you guys. I have nothing negative to report except for the fact that the war is ongoing in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, in Libya, and Assange is in jail while all of these war criminals are not.
Mm-hmm. Could you talk a little bit as we get started here about what Julian means to you and what WikiLeaks has done and kind of exposed for you and kind of what you think about the trial so far?
Absolutely. I think that what Julian has done for the world is shed a light on cockroaches, and those cockroaches have, obviously are upset about it. And they scuttled back into the shadows, so to speak. Basically, especially for Syria, Assange's Clinton leaks have exposed the fact that the United States was okay with working with Al-Qaeda and ISIS and to destroy Syria. And that had repercussions not only for Syria, but for the whole world. It also, his just looking at the Middle East as a whole as well, he's exposed war criminals, torturers, and the thousands and thousands of people that were murdered under false pretenses and lies. So Assange is a hero to us, a hero.
Here in the U.S., there's a really hardcore veil of propaganda where most people don't even realize that Julian's on trial right now until you go to talk with them about it. Is it something, a similar situation over in Syria, or is information about him more readily available through your media outlets?
Well, I'm not in Syria at the moment. I have to also state that clearly. I'm in Australia and I have Australian citizenship. And so I also see Assange in that way as a fellow Australian citizen, which the Australian government has completely abandoned. And what I'm seeing here from the Australian media is a complete and utter blackout. Nothing about Julian. They're happy to talk about journalists leaving China because they got a talking to by the Chinese secret police, but they have nothing to say about an Australian journalist that is currently incarcerated and being persecuted politically by the US and the UK. So that's what I can see. But as for Syria, of course, Syria, here's the thing, what you have to understand. Assange didn't really take any side. He just wanted to expose lies and show the truth. And he leaked stuff about Russia. He leaked stuff about Assad, like he leaked Assad's emails. But the difference is that in the case of Russia and in the case of Assad, the things that he leaked did not contain any crimes. I mean, if you compare Assad's emails to Clinton's emails, the worst thing that they could come up with in terms of what they found in Assad and his wife's emails is that she bought a very expensive chandelier. Like, that was one of the headlines. Like, she bought this very, very expensive chandelier in the middle of the war. And another, and the fact that they love each other and he shared some music with her. That was the stories that came out of Assad and his wife's email leaks. Whereas when you look at Clinton, there was all of this pedophilia, terror supporting, illegal stuff that was going on. So the difference between Russia, like Assange as well, he exposed some leaks from Russia about us spying, and yet still there wasn't anything of a criminal nature in those leaks. So obviously, people who don't want their stuff leaked usually have something to hide, and it's usually illegal. And the reason why it's not Syria and it's not Russia that are trying to persecute Assange is because it's the United States that's trying to persecute him, is because it's their crimes that were exposed. And that is the position that that's why for Syria and Russia, they have no problem with Assange. And of course, for Syrian people, we appreciate what he has done. Even in leaking Assad's emails, he didn't harm the country really, because now we know we have a right to know who are our leaders, right? We have the right to understand these things that are secret. And of course, it's only criminals that don't want that to happen.
Yeah, we've made the point on the show before that the very same people who will tell me or tell you, well, if you aren't doing anything wrong, then you don't have anything to hide. Like, as soon as you flip that around on them, they freak the fuck out. And their version of freaking the fuck out is to lock up journalists and publishers and have them tortured, and to at least in the case of the UK, pass out D notices which come directly from GCHQ to silence a story, to kill a story. It's a little bit more subtle here rather than just issue a government decree. We've put the government on television and now we call them experts or contributors. And a retired CIA chief can walk out and say whatever the fuck narrative he wants to, and that he needs to peddle, and people will go, oh gosh, well, he'd know, wouldn't he?
Yeah, exactly. But and of course you've also been experiencing censorship in terms of Silicon Valley, Twitter, Facebook. It's interesting because the point of Twitter and Facebook, the purpose, especially of Facebook, was to spy on people. That was the whole reason it was created, not only to find out what their opinions are, what their likes and dislikes are, but also like who their friends are. So unfortunately, there was a lot of peer pressure to join. And for a time, Syria banned Facebook because they knew that that was the purpose of it. Twitter was created in order to provide a platform to ignite color revolutions and wars in countries that the US doesn't like. It was around the time 2009, just 2 years before the Arab Spring, and like you know it's a news travels very fast with Twitter, and it offered anonymity. But now these same social medias are being used against the countries that created them for the purpose of destroying other countries, in the sense that people are using them for activism, to spread information, to share knowledge, and now that's the reason why they're censoring them. So I guess the whole point of this is that democracy and civil liberties in the West is a complete and utter lie. It doesn't actually exist. To say it does is kind of a way to keep people blind and asleep. And what's happening to Assange demonstrates that very clearly to people. And I think, unfortunately, he's paying the price to show this to us.
And as dark as it is, the prosecution on Friday, Claire Dobbins, the junior prosecutor for the U.S., went as far as to argue that you violated the Espionage Act even if you just retweeted information that had classified material in it. And the implications of that are, it's like rapturous, essentially. The ability for them to just go in and remove so many people if that precedent's allowed to stand and if that legal argument's allowed to exist.
I think it's
even on. Oh, I'm sorry. Even on CNN, I think they were trying to tell everybody that it was illegal for you to possess the leaks, and you shouldn't read them, and you should only get your information from mainstream media about the leaks. And I think
that was either Chris Cuomo or Chris
I think it was Cuomo.
Yeah,
I think it was Chris Cuomo.
Yeah, told the entire his listening audience that it was illegal to go to WikiLeaks.
Yeah, but I mean what Andrew's saying though is that they're kind of alluding to that. Ideally I think that's where they'd like to head, that even if you so much as, mention something like that embarrasses them or pisses them off, they can come for you. That's a scary thought.
Yeah, it's a precedent that we must fight, not just for our own personal liberties. So it's interesting, however, because they have no problem with the New York Times, for example, talking about having a source in the State Department with classified information that Iraq has WMDs. Like, that's allowed to be printed. We're allowed to swallow that down. But if it's anything that WikiLeaks, which isn't approved, says, now freedom of speech is dependent, I suppose. I guess I also have an interesting. Have you guys seen this movie called I forgot what it's called now? Official Secrets?
No, I haven't seen that movie.
Have you heard of the whistleblower Catherine Gunn?
That's the Catherine Gunn one, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm familiar with her story. I haven't seen the movie.
Yeah, so the point of the whole story, I suppose, is she was actually working with GCHQ, and it was in the lead up to the Iraq War. For anyone in the audience who's listening that doesn't know about this, and she saw an email that was sent to GCHQ that they're supposed to gather any information about the members of the UN Security Council that would vote for the Iraq War. So they were trying to find out anything that they can use about any of the politicians or diplomats in the UN Security Council that would vote on the Iraq War, anything that they can use to blackmail them with. And she felt that this was against the law. Not only that, she felt that it was the entire war is illegal. It makes the war illegal because they're trying to like blackmail people into voting for it. So she leaked the email, and at first there was a media storm about it. Eventually, she actually owned up to leaking the email because that was one of the only ways that she could prove that it was real, because there was all this doubt being shed on it about it not being real. And they were going to put her on trial, but they decided against it because the argument that her lawyer was going to make was that she didn't do anything wrong because she exposed war crimes. She actually did something in the interests of the people because she was exposing not war crimes but a crime that was happening behind the scenes. And so they dropped the charges against her because they didn't want to put the war itself on trial. And what I see happening with Assange right now and watching his trial, it seems that they couldn't handle. They were ready to put their entire empire on trial in order to persecute this man because they think that it's going to stop the leaks, but it won't. I don't think it will stop the leaks. I think the leaks are going to continue to go on because I think that there's people inside those intelligence agencies that are actually sick and tired of the wars. Chelsea and Manning being one of them. They're sick and tired of war crimes being committed right in front of them because that's not what they signed up for. Probably they had illusions of being the good guys. So, the fact that Trump wanted Julian to give up his source, and Julian didn't, is basically tells anyone who would be a source in future that their identity will be secured, that they will continue to be safe to give up leaks. That's what's important about it.
And I think that that's super important because Kim.com actually released the conversation that he had back in February with Julian about the conversation with Dana Rohrabacher and setting up that back channel. And Julian, even when I believe almost all of his internet had been cut already and then given back to him, he had been in the embassy for almost 7 years at that point, still said, I don't need a favor from anyone and I'm not here to do anyone favors. They have a First Amendment, they can use it. And just like the audacity and like the willpower that takes to literally just be able to stand up and be like, okay, like we're good. Like I've exposed this much, I can walk away. But for him to just continue to say, no, like there is truth and there is righteousness and justice, and that's what I'm going for. It was really, I don't know, really powerful when that came out back in February.
And I think Mimi made a good point too, but wherever there is power, there will be dissent. The leaks aren't going to stop. People aren't going to stop fighting back. There's always going to be somebody willing to stand up. So I find some comfort in that. I don't know to what degree we'll be successful, but at least we have that.
Well,
go on, please.
With you being in Australia, you're in kind of a unique situation because we have a good friend out there whose name is David McBride, the whistleblower that exposed the war crimes that were happening and the politicalization of Australia's involvement in the Iraq, and I think it was Iraq, but maybe Afghanistan war.
I thought it was Afghanistan.
And
I saw the shooting video of the farmer.
And I just wanted to kind of get your opinion on that situation too, because that was at least the first time in my knowledge that a news studio was legitimately completely raided out in Australia with documents seized with the Australian Broadcasting Company. So could you talk about your opinion on that a little bit and your thoughts?
Yeah, it's basically, this is a police state, this is a police state, and the thing that upsets me, like, okay, if it's a police state, that's fine. Just admit that it's a police state. Don't pretend that this is a democracy and we have civil rights. Just tell people, hey, be careful because this is a police state. That would be nice, an admission like that. Where else in the world do you have your secret police raiding journalists and studios other than in a totalitarian state? So the crimes that were committed by the Australian SAS, they should be known. People should go to jail for them. This is the point. I mean, it seems that there are rules for the people and different rules for the government and the military, and that's unacceptable. And who is standing to protect the criminals? It's the police here that are protecting the criminals, and that's also unacceptable. So that's my point. I think it's like a microcosm of what happened to Assange, what happened here with the Afghanistan war crimes files. These people have crimes to hide. Like, that's the point. That's why they're raiding these studios.
Well, and in David McBride's case, he went out of his way to go through every proper channel, try to do the right thing, send it to everyone he thought would be able to move it through chain of command, and he was dismissed outright or rebuffed or ignored. And finally, like, after exhausting himself trying to do it the quote unquote right way, that's when he went to the press. And it's one of those situations where, like with Julian and Chelsea Manning and the collateral murder video, the only people that have ever been arrested for that were Julian and Chelsea. David McBride is looking at least 50 years if they prosecute him. He'll be the only person to go to jail for what the Afghanistan leaks showed everybody in Australia.
And we don't really get to hear about it. That's the irony, is that our media is silent about this. Like, and they're the ones that are getting raided. Like, they don't they see? Which goes to show how much under control they are. They're basically mouthpieces for the state. You know, they're completely the cowardice is so intense, and they're happy to cover up things. They don't want to know about crimes going on overseas. So yeah, I think it's it also shows not only is it, even if you do it the right way, even if you are completely not done anything illegal, they'll still raid your offices and put you in jail, like they did with Assange. Their own laws are just sham as well. I think that's what it shows. And I wanted to say something as well. I guess maybe I'll wait to say it. I have another point to make, but I'll pass over to you guys for a moment.
Well, I just wanted to actually say thank you for helping us share the call to action so much. Because getting those out and getting them into the public is super, super important. We have a whole bunch of them up on the website, and the newest one is actually contacting every single member of the Australian Parliament, demanding Julian's freedom. I have all of their official email addresses on there, short of like 3 of them that I didn't want to just guess at. So I just wanted to say thank you for being involved in that way and helping us share those around.
Oh, my pleasure. I shared it all over Facebook. But the problem is that I think that people will look at it, they will share it, but they won't actually email those people. I think we need to think differently about how we're gonna strategize, and perhaps instead of just social media, maybe there's other avenues we can use to push people to action. Maybe by phone calls or by pamphlets in letterboxes, things like that. I'm not sure, but collectivism is not enough. And it's also interesting because there's these organizations. I don't know if you've heard of Get Up Australia. Like in America, you have a very similar organization. Actually, it's made by the same people, called MoveOn.org.
Okay.
And Avaz. So they claim to support Julian Assange, but I don't really see a big drive for them to get this stuff pushed. Do you guys have any comment on that?
That's a problem. I'll let Steve take it.
So most of our, I guess, like nonprofit industrial complex is it either owned or funded or managed by sociopaths. Especially a lot of the environmental groups right now, which is kind of tragic in its own way, where the same people who are responsible for destroying the planet are now like hijacking what's left of it and want to ransom it off in little bits and pieces. So it took a lot to get Amnesty International to comment on this. We had to, I mean, and it was something that, you know, we had pushed for. It really, I'll put it this way. NBC News has spent more time and energy covering the letter from lawyers for Assange that was signed by like Lula from Brazil and a number of other former heads of state, some current members of parliament worldwide and whatnot, but basically world leaders and the international lawyering community signed this letter, and NBC has paid more attention to that than they have the entire Assange hearing. You can't, I'm not going to say you can't, but it's been very, very difficult to get any of the nonprofits that aren't like Code Pink or Popular Resistance or like the People's Power Assembly, which I don't think is even a nonprofit. They're just an activist organization out of Baltimore. But to even co-sign on the last two times that we've been to Washington, D.C. during these hearings. We went in February as well. So it's, yeah, I mean, we've seen more movement in the last 3 weeks than in the last 18 months.
And so the two stories that I'm seeing going around are the all the world leaders signing onto this petition, but also the part.
Oh no!
It happened.
You froze.
Oh, so the two things that I've seen circulate are the story about the world leaders signing on, as well as the pardon about Julian. And my concern is that the media is not even really framing them properly, to where the last 20 years have been spent demonizing South American leaders. And then they choose to put those names specifically forward, almost like baiting Donald Trump into saying, hey, why don't you support this guy that all these enemy socialist nations support? And then with the pardon, it's being driven and pushed alongside Russiagate.
Yeah, all about Russiagate.
Yeah, so it's just weird that even the headlines that they cover are things that are designed to spin it so safely and so meticulously that even when it is good news, it still sounds bad to the viewers of those shows because they've been propagandized about how terrible all of those leaders are to begin with.
Yep, and the only reason that they are covering the Trump pardon is because they want to spin it as, oh, look, Trump's trying to cover up Russiagate, because the whole, I think that they are, this is, I could go very deeply into what I think is going on.
You are more than welcome to if you'd like.
Right? I mean...
Yeah.
I sign up for that.
It's hard to navigate, though. It's hard to explain. But I think before that, I'd like to just make a point, because the whole crux of the argument of putting Assange in jail is that he's not a journalist. He's working for Russia, or he's working for, like, he's basically like a state actor or something like that. And the point I'd like to make is, and in the media they say, well, Snowden, he went to Russia and he was safe there. And I think, in fact, I will say that probably if Assange went to the Russian embassy instead of the Ecuadorian embassy, he could have ended up like Snowden. But he, maybe even knowing that, chose to go to the Ecuadorian embassy because he didn't want his work to be tainted by this accusation of bias, or that he's just working for Russia or for the state. So he sacrificed himself for the integrity of WikiLeaks and what he's trying to do. He puts that as more important than his own life, and that's just heroic. And you know that was always available to him, and it should be noted that he chose not to do that. He chose to go to the Ecuadorian embassy. He never gets any credit for that. But I also have, that is what the one aspect of the people that oppose Assange will say. The second group of people are actually amongst activists that say, well, he never leaked anything about Israel. Have you guys ever heard of that?
Oh, yeah. No, it's pretty funny. It is.
Yeah. So, look, way back in the day, I listened to that kind of thing. But like maybe in 2011, I did wonder about that because, this is one of the topics that is always like, you really know stuff about someone when it comes to their position on Israel, right? It's one of the things that it's a red line. So, but I think that the fact that some of the most hardcore Zionists, like ultra Zionists, are responsible for wanting to put him in prison, is it goes to show you how the Zionists feel about Assange. So if it's, sorry, excuse me 1 minute. It's Sheldon Adelson. I had to find his name because my brain is going too fast. Sheldon Adelson was responsible for spying on him in the prison, and he actually is Trump's top donor. And people ask, why does Trump need a donor? He's a billionaire. Well, actually, Sheldon has 10 times the amount of money that Trump has, and Sheldon is actually responsible for funding birthright trips to Israel from the for Jewish Americans to go from America to Israel. So this guy is like basically an Israeli who's hates Julian and is trying to put him in jail. And what does that tell people how do people who call Assange, why doesn't he leak about Israel? How do they explain that?
Well, they're not interested in finding out the reality of the situation because all they would have to do is go to wikileaks.org and type in Israel, and God, tens of thousands of emails will come up just under that subject. You can narrow the search parameters as much as you want to. There are still leaked cables, there are still memos, there are emails. They exist. They're there for anyone to look at. There's that one, and my other favorite idiotic question is, well, why hasn't WikiLeaks said ABC about XYZ? And it's because they have no goddamn idea how WikiLeaks operates. In order for them to publish, they have to be given something in the first place that meets their publishing standards, which is, obviously of the public interest, has never been printed before, and is material that they can 100% vet, that is in no way, shape, or form altered. And that's the only way anything gets published. So if anyone's mad about what WikiLeaks hasn't said, provide them the information, and if it's legit, it'll get said.
Exactly. It's about
I just typed it in on the WikiLeaks search engine. And Israel has, I would say, over 400,000 mentions throughout all of the different WikiLeaks drops. Even including like the Sony drops and the Clinton emails, the HB Gary emails, and then there's over 340,000 from the global intelligence files. So there is, on Israel, I don't know what the context is with all of them, but that name is at least said over 400,000 times in WikiLeaks email releases.
But they don't publish anything on Israel, Andrew.
And you hear the same argument made here in the U.S. That they don't publish anything on Russia, or they didn't
Russia.
publish anything on Trump,
Ooh,
which
let's
is,
look that up.
yeah, as soon as you type the names in, it literally just pops up hundreds of thousands of emails.
How else do you think we knew about the Pied Piper strategy?
Okay, so Russia, it's probably about, I would say 610,000 probably. Like there's 609,341 in the global intelligence files alone. But they don't print anything, or they don't publish anything about Russia, guys.
As far as I know, they actually published stuff about Russia spying on its own people, and the leak came from Russia. Question is, like, have there been any leaks that come from Israel? But Assange can't control that. It's not like he's, you know,
That's such a bizarre thing to be angry at a publishing organization for. Like, why don't you get this information that I'm sure you'd really like to get and publish? Like, why? I mean, of course they want to publish that. Somebody needs to give it to them. They can't like magically make it appear so that they can publish it. I don't understand why they're mad at WikiLeaks over that. You know,
it's a, you know, like, I'm from Syria, and as you know, we don't even for us, Israel is the Jewish ISIS. Okay, it was created the same way by a bunch of terrorist organizations that flooded into the borders and created something based on a prophecy that if they can create in Israel, the Messiah will come. That is basically ISIS, you know, and their borders are not declared; they're always expanding, and we don't acknowledge their existence as a country. So, for someone like me, just to acknowledge that what Assange is doing is not at all biased towards Israel, should say something. You know, he would publish those things if he had them. I am sure of it, because in fact, the reason why the ultra Zionists like Sheldon Adelson are against him is because the exposure of these crimes, of these multiple wars that are going on, of the fact that Clinton and Obama and were supporting Al Qaeda and ISIS in Syria and destroying Syria, and it shows also that they were doing all these things on behalf of Israel. It said so in the leaks. So it just goes to show you that they have hurt Israel the most by exposing these war crimes.
Absolutely. Because ultimately the United States and Israel are pretty much just one nation combined, to where the U.S. is the muscle bulldog of whatever Israel wants to accomplish.
Well, that's the two eyes. There's two eyes, but the two eyes are U.S. and Israel and U.S. and the U.K. And I to kind of like circle way back into this conversation real quick, I did want to it seems like Australia is like the testing ground for whatever the US wants to get away with, and they just kind of got to see how it goes first. And so they use Australia and New Zealand as like kind of a I don't know, a field test for whatever horrific shit they want to pull here. Because ever since Memorial Day and the whole fucking world going crazy over George Floyd, there have now been over 900 U.S. journalists that have been shot with rubber bullets or mace, tear gas, beaten by police, arrested, detained, all that kind of stuff. Just in the last, 4 months? In a third of a year, 900 journalists. Like, it is open season on anyone who even resembles like a citizen journalist or independent media. And this would not be possible without the help of mainstream media, without the help of quote unquote like independent YouTubers and shit who just are there to do DNC propaganda and confirmation of bias, fucking hope porn, and not, I don't know, talk to their audience about real shit. Their silence on Julian Assange is making it possible for the U.S. to run roughshod over our own independent media and citizen journalists. 100%.
Maybe it's about creating fear as well, because you see what Assange is getting put through, and people are gonna not want to say anything anymore.
Yeah,
Right.
this is when Daniel Ellsberg testified last week. And this is something that he's talked about frequently, but it's the chilling effect. And that dates back to Nixon trying to get rid of Dan Ellsberg. He wanted to create a situation where you saw what someone who stuck their neck out went through, and it made everyone else kind of want to be like, I don't think I really care that much about that story. And that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to make people not want to publish facts about the US government or the UK government or the corporations that, frequently commit waste, fraud, abuse. If you're like Pepsi, you hire the occasional death squad,
It's unfortunate that I think that the best asset we had in terms of honest journalism, who let everything out on the table, everything from all sides, is WikiLeaks. It's Julian, and look what he's facing. And I wanted to actually discuss some of the content of some of the leaks in terms of Israel, for example, and Syria, and which is near and dear to my heart. In the 2016 leaks, they were discussing plans to the U.S. State Department internally said the fall of Assad could well ignite a sectarian war between Shiites and Sunnis, drawing in Iran, which in the view of Israeli commanders would not be a bad thing for Israel. So basically, this is hundreds of thousands of people. Well, if we look at the Middle East as a whole, or at least, hundreds of thousands of people, civilians being ripped to shreds for Israel to be happy. And that is pretty much, even Trump himself said, we're not in the Middle East for oil, we're in the Middle East for Israel. So again, exposing these wars does not help them. I think
and then gave Bibi the key to the White House.
Yeah.
Just as a public, you see? Do you see what I'm doing here? I'm giving Benjamin Netanyahu the key to the White House. Get it on camera. It was just, blatant.
It's very cringy.
Blatant. Ballsy.
Even. You know what it is? It's sycophants. They're sycophants. If you've actually, there was a Zoom call between Richard Grenell and some Republican donors, and he's what the level of groveling he does towards the Israelis is beyond. It's cringy. He calls it the eternal state of Israel, and I forced everybody to wear a yarmulke in Germany at this in the U.S. embassy. All of this stuff it's Zionism, and I think for those people who are saying that about Assange, just wake up to yourself. And for those that are saying that he's a Russian asset, also wake up to yourself, because he didn't go to the Russian embassy. And I want to comment about what you said about Australia being a testing ground. I think what you're saying is in terms of the forced inoculation that they're about to push on people, the police state that we're facing.
General police state stuff, surveillance, all, yeah.
Because this place is completely it almost has no will of its own. The last prime minister that Australia had, which maybe had some independence, was kicked out in a coup. It was Kevin Rudd. Before that, it was Golf Whitlam, who of course was just replaced by the UK. So, and the crime that both those men committed was stepping on Israel's toes. Because for Kevin Rudd's case, he exposed the fact at the United Nations that Israel was stealing Australian passports, using them to go to the UAE and assassinate people with. And for that, the Zionist lobby actually, he wrote in his book that the Zionist lobby here told him that they were going to replace him with Julia Gillard, which they did like a few months later. And Golf Whitlam was also someone who didn't want to give Israel everything that it wanted, and he got kicked out. But on top of that, like they go wherever the US and the UK tell them to go, even if it's against Australian interests, because at the end of the day, Australia is closer to Asia than it is to Europe. And yet they even if it destroys Australian economy, they will still do whatever these nations tell them to do.
Well, one of the big problems, there's tons of big problems, but one of the big problems in Australia, a little over 100 years ago, they broke from the British Empire in a revolution, and they got a constitution put in. But if you read it, it's literally only about trade, for the most part, and the judicial system and government structure, where they never actually got a Bill of Rights implemented to protect First Amendment rights, to protect the citizens in and of themselves, to where all it is petitions and protections for corporations in Australia.
You cut out for a second, Andrew.
So the biggest thing about the Australian Constitution, they have no Bill of Rights, which basically mitigates or negates all protections for citizens for anything, whether it's journalism, assembly, what have you, to where their constitution is primarily focused on protecting government officials and the interests of corporations.
Yep, we don't have a Bill of Rights. It's not like America. We don't have freedom of speech. There's nothing to protect that here. We wish that we had anything close to what you guys have, even while it's being eroded. So, you know, no wonder it's a testing ground for how people will react. And unfortunately, also, for example, the UAE was a testing ground for Saudi Arabia in terms of like normalizing relations with Israel, because they know that the people of the UAE are just really, really they are so suppressed and so living in fear that or either that, or they're just so comfortable that they're not going to do anything. And I think Australia is not the same as the United States. The United States has, in spite of like the history of Eureka, the Eureka Stockade, and like there's an element of culturally rebellious nature amongst Australians, over the last 50 years, let's say, that's really just almost completely gone. People are so complacent here, and that's why it's easy to test these things here. And you know, actually, the funny thing is, a lot of people don't even know that Julian Assange is Australian, and I think Americans are told that as well. You know, they're told that he committed treason against the United States. He's not even American.
I've been in DC. I was here for the first week of Julian's trial, and then I came back Friday of the second week. And at least once per event, there's someone that like rolls by on a bike or something and literally just yells, "Julian's a traitor!" And then the only thing you can yell back is, "He's Australian." Like, what do you mean?
You fucking puppet!
Right. Like they're riding past.
Dude, there are blue checks. There are blue checks on Twitter who run around calling him a traitor. I'm like, you have a blue check. You can't figure out that he's Australian? Get it together. Like, what is your problem? You got a fancy blue check? Figure it out. Crazy.
The Guardian can figure it out. They see imaginary Paul Manaforts everywhere, but they can at least get the "he's from Australia" part right.
Surely Luke Harding can figure that out. Surely.
Luke will get to the bottom of this.
He found collusion, for God's sake, from like the way back in the 1980s when
You know what?
Putin
Dude, my
trained Trump
favorite
up.
thing ever was Aaron Mate making him cry.
Seriously, I watch
By
it
asking
regularly.
the question.
I
So
watch
what
it regularly.
One of the horrifying things, if you accept which it is, Australia as a test site, New Zealand as a test site for future U.S. tyranny. They've started arresting people simply for making Facebook posts about protesting. This was first brought to my attention probably, I want to say, around World Press Freedom Day, when there was a group of immigrants' rights activists that were gathering in their cars to go and just show support for immigrants that were staying in a hotel. And the lead organizer of that got arrested 2 hours before the event was scheduled to start. They detained him, they searched his home, they took all of his computers, his son's computers, all the electronics in the house, and him to the station. And I believe he did get released a few hours later, but we saw that now roll out on a larger scale in Australia, where journalists are being, or not journalists, but where regular people are being targeted for organizing efforts. So I think that this is like the beta test stage of being able to round people up and quell public dissent about people that have shared the WikiLeaks information and have shared classified information through social media. Because the US, like I had mentioned earlier, is literally arguing that they can go in and arrest anyone that's ever read a classified document, which I think is horrifying. Read, shared, proliferated. And so I see those arrests in Australia as kind of that first step of the test of rounding people up from social media.
You know, it's also funny because at the end of the day, it's their own organizations that leak these files. Like they're the ones that are leaking it. And so basically they're punishing people for their own failures. I think that it's kind of amusing. It's almost like they want to lay the blame on others because they're so embarrassed about, where else did these leaks come from? So it's not like Russia has access to the DNC, which brings me back to Russia Gate. I do want to talk about the media in the United States and why the only time it talks about Assange is when it wants to highlight that Trump is, making these kind of going in deeper. I think the Democrats, the vast majority of mainstream media sources in the United States are 100% in the pocket of the Democrats. Would you say that that's fair? I think Fox News is more taking the Republican line, but everybody else is the opposite way. And they're really, really angry that Clinton lost the last election. Like it screwed up a lot of their plans. They blame Assange for it, and they invented the whole Russiagate thing. And Trump is an evil. They're all evil. Like they're all evil and despotic and treacherous in their own ways. But he has his Trump is all about Trump and maintaining Trump's power as well. And basically the line is, look, he would free the horrible Assange just to prove that Russiagate doesn't exist. And I think that if Assange, they must have some information that the source isn't Russia. Like they must know that the source isn't Russia. And I think I'm going to throw a name out there, Seth Rich, maybe there's others, but if Julian were not a self-sacrificing heroic person, then maybe it would shut down the whole Russiagate thing. And potentially, the thought occurred to me that the reason why Trump he went from I love WikiLeaks to having Sheldon Adelson orchestrate his arrest, and Nick Grinnell, as well, orchestrate his arrest illegally, by the way, by pulling him out of an embassy. Almost the same as Khashoggi. That's the next step. You go into the embassy and then you get cut up into many, many pieces and dissolved in acid. Like that, the embassies are no longer safe places for people. So, basically, I think the reason why is maybe he's wants to blackmail. Maybe someone convinced him that this is the way to blackmail Assange to reveal his sources. Throw him in jail until he tells us until he destroys the Russiagate thing, so they can stop pestering me about it in the media. And for Israelis, it's also great because their involvement in promoting these wars is no longer being exposed. And for the Clinton administration and the Democrats, it's also great because their crimes, the person that exposed their crimes, is also being punished. So I think that is what's going on behind the scenes. What do you guys think?
So I agree with that, because you actually had the Hillary Clinton campaign, as exposed in the DNC leaks, play what was called the Pied Piper strategy, which was literally elevating Donald Trump in the media through like CNN, MSNBC, and those other liberal allies in the media, to make him look like he was the front runner. And they gave him billions of dollars in free airtime. Group of Democratic senators.
Repeat that, Andre. You cut out.
Sorry. So Pied Piper, Hillary Clinton and her buddies in the media got Donald Trump elected. They gave him billions of dollars in free media, and I apologize for my terrible internet. But then you have a group of Democratic senators, who I'll pull their names up in a minute. There was 6 of them that actually requested that Julian be taken out of the Ecuadorian embassy, and they gave the letter to Mike Pence. And I believe Mike Pence went as far as to go to Ecuador and meet with Lenin Moreno a couple weeks or a few days before Julian was taken out of the embassy following the IMF loan. And then we found out later through Cassandra Fairbanks that it was Rick Grinnell that had actually orchestrated more of that behind the scenes at Donald Trump's request. So it's a one-party state that just plays the divide and conquer card with ideologies.
Precisely.
I think Dianne Feinstein's on that list, Andrew. If you pull it up, that list of, I'm pretty sure Dianne Feinstein will be one of those 6, because I remember there being a big stink about it. But yeah, I absolutely agree with that for sure. And I think you're right. Trump's in it for himself. That's why I was super excited when Glenn Greenwald went on Tucker Carlson, because he nailed it. He really did. People kept saying, "Oh, he should have said this," and I think a lot of people thought he was talking to maybe voters. I think Glenn Greenwald was talking to Donald Trump specifically, and he was going right at his ego, and it was genius. And I mean, that really is what it's going to take. Trump's not an ideologue; he doesn't give a shit. If it helps him, he's down. So we just have to figure out a way to get in his ear and either boost his ego somehow, make him think he's going to be king shit if he lets Assange go, or just make him think that there's some other benefit for him in that.
So that's why I think it's super important, while we have a bunch of people watching right now, that people go to Trump rallies on a single issue basis. I'm talking only about Julian Assange, passing out flyers about Julian, preferably giving tons of posters out for people to pass out, because you create a situation where the security guards will either rip the poster out of people's hands and destroy the illusion of Trump supporting Julian, or you create a groundswell where Trump sees his base holding these signs at his rallies, and it's the only time he gets to interact with the general public. So as much as people wouldn't want to go to a Trump rally for whatever reason, going there on an issue-specific basis, only supporting and talking about Julian, not any other political candidate, not Biden, not even really Trump himself, but just Julian, I think that would be one of the largest ways to get him free. And then all you need is one person in the crowd to start a free Julian Assange, there's only one decision, no extradition chant in the middle of those rallies, and literally turn the Trump rally into a free Assange rally. And I guarantee you that would be, if done more than once, Julian would be set free at that point, because there's been so much talk behind the scenes of like Edward Snowden getting pardoned and things like that. But if you just put Julian in Trump's face, I don't think he would have any problem going.
I think that's a great idea, and I would also play the stick, so that the carrot and the stick. If I was a Trump supporter, I would say, you will not have my vote if you don't. Julian, he needs to know that his base isn't blindly supporting him. He needs to know that he may lose if he doesn't do what he says. At the beginning, he was I love WikiLeaks. Now he's throwing them in jail, wasn't he going to put Clinton in jail? Whatever happened to that? So we need to basically, the way to get people to do what you want isn't just to say, I support you, can you support my cause? Is to threaten to pull your support, because that's exactly what Sheldon Adelson does to Trump. I mean, recently they had an argument and he threatened to pull support. God knows what it was about. It was around the Beirut blast time. I don't know. But yeah, we don't know what it was about, but he threatened to pull support. And okay, maybe like billions of dollars doesn't compare to one voter, but maybe will compare to millions of voters. And I think that the problem as well, like what I'm glad Glenn Greenwald did, to go to Tucker Carlson, because Tucker Carlson, the left hate him, but he's the only anti-war guy in the right-wing media right now, with one of the most powerful voices. And it's important to work together for the important things, because at the end of the day, people are dying. Like that, people are being killed in these wars, and they're being tortured. So to not work with the right just because they're right, it's criminal. I mean, it's just, it doesn't help. And I think we need to break down the walls of, you can't work with them, you can't work with them, you can't go to a Trump rally. No, we need to work with both sides on an issue basis.
It makes no sense when people get angry at leftists for going on with Tucker Carlson. He's one of the only people in mainstream media who will platform leftist voices. And he has a huge platform. And if somebody like Anya Parampil can go on Tucker Carlson and expose that audience to leftist views, that's a win. And the people who get angry about that are self-defeating turds. Like, that doesn't help. You have to meet people where they are. You can't expect somebody to change their opinion on something and come to your side if they're never introduced to the ideas. So I think anytime a leftist can get on any right-wing platform and speak to that kind of an audience, I think that's a great thing, and we should take advantage of it.
That's why the whole point of Action for Assange is that we're a post-partisan organization. Right. I don't personally believe that you can have a conversation about policy or politics without first being able to read as much unspun primary source material as humanly possible. And then once you've done that and you've figured out for yourself how to digest and process that information, then you can have a conversation about it. But if all you're relying on is somebody's opinion about something that they read or something that we all watched together, but now you require a like pundit to translate what your opinion needs to be, you are playing right into somebody else's narrative. At least if you do it accidentally, having the knowledge of using primary source material, you're going into it way more well informed, and it's way easier to catch, like, hey, wait a minute, I'm playing into something here. Let me back up. Let me, reevaluate. But still, you have the ability to have that self-determination.
It's like seeing with two eyes instead of one.
Yeah.
I think that's why the narrative, we talk about this all the time. I'm sure people get tired of hearing us talk about it, but that's why, like, kind of the battle for narrative, the battle for information, that is the front line of everything else. That's, you can't get healthcare if you don't have free press. You can't get, action on climate change if you don't have a free press. I mean, if all you're getting is essentially state-run propaganda, and that state-run propaganda benefits corporations, do you really think you're going to get a ban on fossil fuels? Probably not. So, I mean, it's something that I wish more people would take seriously. I mean, I wish that people would take this Julian Assange case more seriously and recognize, the implications could be huge, will be huge. I mean, regardless of what happens, it's going to affect a lot of things. It already has. So the fact that it's difficult to get people to speak on it is just endlessly frustrating.
So we had a couple questions here in the chat, and I just kind of want to field them to anybody who wants to answer. Our good friend Nat from Mexico asked, Is the last day of the trial the day that Barrister is going to say yes or no to extradition, or will it come later? Do we know definitively? Because I don't I think that at the end of this, my assumption is at the end of this that she will make a ruling.
Yeah.
And then there is the years-long appeals process, depending on if the UK will respect its own laws and allow the appeals to go through. Another question we had from one of our Twitch viewers is, if Julian gets extradited or suicided, who is the next in command in WikiLeaks? So Christian Bronfman is currently the executive director or editor. Did I say his name wrong? I'm terrible with names.
Really bad. It wasn't even close.
Yeah, it was very not close. Good effort. A for
You
effort.
were like, Dan Bronfman. I don't
Oh, the things that make you hate yourself, let me tell you.
Oh,
So
boy.
I
Christian
don't.
Ramson.
Yes, he's currently the executive editor, but even in these even in the superseding indictment, they've gone as far as to implicate Sarah Harrison in conspiracy for assisting Edward Snowden getting to Hong Kong. That's something that Edward Snowden didn't even talk about when he was on the Joe Rogan Experience recently.
He might not be allowed to because there might be lawyers involved.
That's fair.
So if he's already spoken to a lawyer about it, they probably told him not to bring it up when you go on Joe Rogan.
I mean, he also wasn't allowed to talk about the global spying apparatus that was built, and he did that too. So
yeah, and now he probably listens to his lawyer more often.
But that I'm looking through, I don't see many more questions. If you guys have questions, please put them in the chat. But I did want to just open the floor for any of you guys to toss questions around to anybody.
Hey, I have a question. Did anybody happen to see exactly how long it took before Turd Sniffer lost his mind this morning? What's his name? Lewis? He was like yelling within like the first few minutes.
Right off the bat.
He was already mad. Like, what? Did anybody time how long?
Well,
look,
dude, okay, think about it. Think about it. He had to call off court the first week.
Hold on, can we give a little context first about like the people we're talking about, just so everyone can know?
Okay, sorry. So the Lewis in this situation is James Lewis QC, the lead prosecutor during this rendition hearing. And oh my God, I'll go find it. I showed it this morning. But somebody sent me a picture of Lewis's little section on the website for his law form. At any rate, so after being thoroughly destroyed by Trevor Tim on the Wednesday of the first week, James Lewis took himself out on the town, did not make it back to his house, did not have any of his paperwork that he needed for, the biggest press freedom trial in our lifetimes. Didn't have his papers. His charger he had apparently left at the court. His laptop had, a dwindling battery. So they tried to push court off. Couldn't quite do it. He logged in on a different device that was still fucky. And in comes Claire Dobbins saying, my husband may or may not have symptoms that may look, COVID. And they went, court's canceled. We'll see you Monday. Okay, so that happened, and Lewis came back on Monday, and he was feisty as fuck because he'd had a nice long 4-day weekend, and he could probably, charge his computer and whatnot, maybe rifle through some of his paperwork, and just witness after witness has destroyed this man. At least 2, if not 3 already, when asked a question, have looked at him and said, I'm glad you asked me that, which is just horror, like a horror for the person asking that question to a witness that isn't theirs. So yesterday, because they had already struck out with Claire Dobbins, who was their JV prosecutor. So yesterday they brought in fucking Johnny Bush League. Joel Smith is his name. And he got his ass handed to him. So of course, when Lewis came in this morning, he was hotter than a $2 pistol and just wanted to fucking air it all out there in the courtroom, which he did in the exact same way that he always does, which is by trying to discredit the witness, fucking forgetting that in a different case, James Lewis QC had sought the exact same witness for expert testimony. The witness, however, did not forget and reminded him.
He got laughed at in court. He got laughed at, you guys. Like, he's been getting his ass kicked every day, but the man got laughed at. He's a lawyer in court. He got laughed at. Yeah. I mean, I guarantee you there is cocaine and hookers going on right now for Mr. Lewis.
I just want to make it home tonight. That's my plan. Is I just want QC Lewis to go home because you literally had him today ask a witness, like, please stick to the script, like, please answer the questions.
I need you to stick to my script, not the script, my script.
And what happened later in court? So he pissed what's his name, Kopelman, off. Like he made the witness upset because he had previously been an expert for Lewis, like Steve said. And the whole time he's trying to discredit everything this man has done for Julian by saying that he's not an expert, that everything in his notes is essentially wrong or omitted half of.
There we go.
And there we go. And so,
look at that turd.
So Lewis today got basically served by his witness because he was asking questions and the witness had to remind him, you are the lawyer and I am the psychiatrist. You will not make me change my medically driven decisions in this situation. And it got so
Mega brain.
On two separate occasions.
I'm sorry. I had to.
Oh, no, you're fine. On two separate occasions, Judge Vanessa Baratzer actually had to step in to start questioning the witness because QC Lewis couldn't. That's just how ridiculous.
So let's give the man a break. He's trying to make something out of nothing and pretend that he has a case when he very clearly does not. And his case has been getting destroyed every second of every day. And that has to be exhausting. I mean, and just defeating. And, you know, I don't blame him for, you know, not making it home a couple of nights. I would have a rough time dealing with myself too.
With you guys describing the events going on in the trial, as far as I understand, the trial isn't televised. Are you guys getting a transcript?
We are. So what we've been doing every morning, not every morning, but throughout a couple times in week 1, a couple times in week 2, and now every day in week 3, we're reading the live tweets that are coming out from the people that are connected to the cloud video platform. So Kevin Gostola, I can't remember her name, but Mary, Juan Passarelli, Kostakidis, Assange Defense, and Mohammed Almazi are the 5 that we use for reference points. So we will
check in with Richie Medhurst too.
Yes. So we'll
Medhurst have access?
I don't think he's got access to the cloud video platform. No.
So we
I just want to say as well, since we're on the topic of Richard, he's Syrian like me. So I just want to show you that, like, the entire Syrian Twitter sphere and everybody who has been an activist against the U.S. Occupation in Syria and sanctions are on Julian's side. So we, the Syrians, are on Julian's side. Just wanted to put that out there.
And so to finish it off, what we do is we'll go through all these tweets live. During recesses or slow periods while they're populating, we'll read through additional documents and articles that are coming out. Like Mohammed Almazi took a break to write a beautifully written article about Lewis getting laughed at. So we read that live, and then during lunch break, we spent 45 minutes going through what's called special administrative measures, which is essentially the U.S.'s domestic torture program for inmates, just to make sure that that information was still proliferating while we had a downtime during court. So we're, as far as I know, the only channel, Action for Assange, the only group of people that are actually reading these tweets live as they're happening, providing real-time context to who the people are. And it almost feels like doing sports reporting, which is really sad. But there's no one else that is willing to read or wake up at the wee hours of the morning to do this. So we got put in a very, particular and unique situation where we get to interpret to the world what is actually happening to court in audio form. So I just want to say thank you to those people that are there in court or waking up super early to be able to put this information out there for us to then transcribe to the public. Because that's the only way that people are getting information is through tweets and through us reading them on air.
And them occasionally popping into our live stream.
Yeah.
Which is
and they're
also nice.
They're also covering this case under ridiculous conditions and all kinds of technical bullshit. And, they're all handling, like Juan Pasarelli cracks me up. He'll be dealing with some technology nonsense and he's got jokes and I love it. Like he just stays like so positive.
That Lionel Richie shit killed me, dude. It did. It killed me.
Yeah,
so I wrote him. I'm like, oh, that just made my fucking day.
He's got jokes like that every time. Every time there's some shenanigans, there's Juan with his jokes, and I love it so much. It makes me happy that he's able to find some humor.
Pretty sad that he didn't get to report on Lewis almost getting laughed out of court today.
Yeah.
Like
the
U.S. prosecution is doing so bad at this point that it almost makes you empathize with them. That's how well their script is written, that they want you to feel bad for the bad guys because the defense is doing so well in the case and the witnesses are just ripping everything to pieces.
I heard that they didn't want to even cross-examine Cassandra.
Nope.
They would only read her statement.
The most depressing thing, though, and I'm going to butcher this name, and I'm sorry, Khalid Al-Mazari, who was
the technical difficulties, right?
Yep. So for the full context, QC Lewis tells Vanessa Breitster, I don't want this guy to testify. We can just read his statement into court, and that's enough. And Vanessa Breitster says, no, he can testify. We'll have him connect. Like, he has the right to be cross-examined. And then because of technical issues, he wasn't able to connect and his statement could only be read. So it's really weird how all of the technical issues seem to be in favor of the State Department and the U.S. prosecution, to the point that the U.S. prosecution is now saying there's too many witnesses and this is going to take too long. So they're trying to cut defense witnesses when it was the prosecution that lied about having COVID after Lewis woke up in the wrong apartment without his notes or laptop. It's the UK's court system that is like having the inability to actually broadcast this and have witnesses connect. But somehow it's the defense's fault because on June 22nd.
That's offensive to me. Like, this is, the man is on, like, this is for his life. This is his life. And you're, allowing the prosecution to go on benders and not show up for work and not have, not be prepared for, one of the most important cases of our time. But Julian's on, this is a trial for his life. And the fact that they're trying to cut it short and they're giving them all of these benefits and breaks and all of this, it's offensive to me. And the fact that it isn't, listen, there's so many offensive things about this case. They spied on him, in meetings with his lawyers, and they tried to steal DNA from his children. And, it's disgusting. He shouldn't even be where he's at. And then, with today, the case, they're talking about his very private medical history and for the world to hear. And he shouldn't even be in that position. That shouldn't even be a thing that he has to go through. He shouldn't be there. What did Kevin Gastula say? We shouldn't be here or something like that?
Yeah.
We shouldn't even be.
So if anyone's ever seen the wonderful film Clerks, one of the themes of the first movie is I shouldn't even be here today. And that's the theme
I'm
of
not
this whole
supposed to be
trial.
here today. I'm not even supposed to be
supposed to be here today.
Yep.
But that's how this whole case feels, you guys. Like, he shouldn't even be going through. His family shouldn't have to hear of all of these horrible things that have happened to him, and all of the, that they shouldn't have to hear that, and it shouldn't be exposed to the world, and he shouldn't even be suffering the way that he's suffering. For that to even be said in a courtroom, it's so fucked up, and it's I just get sorry. Here I go, rambling, ranting, getting all fucked up.
No. You're right.
Getting
So real quick, in terms of horrific shit, just Vanessa Baratzer explained the prosecutor's position to the witness. Like, she essentially did the job of the prosecution today, because the prosecution was incapable of doing the job of the prosecution. And when the fucking judge steps in for that, something is really wrong.
About Vanessa Draster, and I think this goes to the reason why the trial isn't being televised. First of all, because they don't want to draw attention to the fact that they're persecuting a journalist. But the second reason is because the people will decide who won. They'll see how weak the US's prosecution is, and if then Vanessa still chooses to say yes to extradition, it's gonna go to her like basically she will lose all respect in the eyes of the world and the general public, which is why it's so important to show people what's going on. At the end of the day, it's she should feel that people are watching. I think that is gonna be very helpful. If I were you guys, and I would love to help, I would create like a little comic strip of events in the court based on these tweets. And if not even a comic strip, maybe an even animated.
I'm sold.
Yeah,
I'm sold. I have no free time, but I am down. I love that idea.
Hire an animator, or just like, even if it's just a picture, we can have a voiceover, because people will watch that more. You can, then you can share it as a video on social media. And as you know, with social media, videos, they actually spread more than words. So.
Well, I do have a pretty exciting announcement too. It's something I've been talking with Kimber and Daniel about behind the scenes. We're going to be launching an action for Assange TikTok now that TikTok is a banned underground platform.
Yeah.
So that's a really exciting thing. It's something Kimber and I had a huge conversation about it yesterday. And the problem is that the internet has just forgotten about Julian. Like, not because the internet forgot, but because the new generation of humans didn't learn about Julian. Because we're 10 years past what he's on trial for right now. Yep. So the hope there in getting on that platform is to be able to connect with the dissident energy, essentially, because now everyone on that platform is breaking the law. So we're really excited to be launching that. It may not come out like today or tomorrow, but it is something that is going to be hitting TikTok eventually. It's just a matter of how we want to format and how we want to do it. So yeah, I'm really excited about getting that going.
I definitely think that's a great idea, because there's a Zoomer kind of energy that is really pissed off, and I think that that's totally something we could tap into. And you're right, the people I was just talking to, my friend Sam, he hosts a podcast called News Dive, I think. But I was just talking to him, and he's just out of journalism school, so he's very young. And, getting these people who, when Julian was, when the collateral murder video came out, they were, 10 or whatever, and now they're 20. And, these kids who, there's this whole new crew of people who, they may have heard of Julian, they may have heard his name or seen him mentioned on Twitter or Instagram or whatever, but they don't know who he is or what he's there for. And I think that we could totally tap into that because I think that they're like a really pissy generation, and I love it.
I have a bad news. So TikTok is no longer a illegal organization app, as far as I know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they deal to sell it to Larry Ellison, the guy who owns Oracle.
Oh, great.
It was still banned in the US. The ban went into effect on Sunday across all the app platforms. So you cannot download it unless you have already had it on your device. And you have to use a VPN to connect to it. There are ways, I don't want to go over them on air. It's super easy to find out how to put them on your phone. It literally just takes a Google search on how to toggle third-party applications in your settings.
Don't go any farther than that. ABB got their channel yanked for that.
I'm not. That's a setting that's open and public. And
you guys remind me of when I would go back to Syria. When Facebook was banned in Syria, I would go to Syria and like my friends would just use mirror sites to get onto Facebook, which was terrible because it's basically a spy apparatus. But it's funny to see the same kind of things happen in the so-called democratic West to censor these apps. But as far as I know, they're gonna make it not banned because of this deal with Larry Ellison. But I do agree that it's getting on it is important because it is a gateway to the Zoomer generation. But it's interesting when you mentioned that if you're talking about the bombing of the Reuters journalists and the children in Iraq, the video that came out by WikiLeaks that Chelsea Manning exposed. It's funny because I was very deeply involved in the anti-war movement at the start of the Iraq War in 2003. Like I was a teenager, but never mind. I would read the news every single day, like every piece of news that came out of Iraq. And I already knew about the bombing of the killing of the Reuters journalist. So when the video of the collateral murder came out, I was like, yeah, but this isn't news. Like doesn't everybody already know about that? And I guess like it had already been in the press, but there wasn't video footage of it. Yeah, I already knew that kids died. But also, it's like having read every news article for years, it was just another war crime. For me, it wasn't any different to any of the other war crimes that I had seen happen over and over and over again. So I was always almost a little bit confused about why it caused such an impact, because it seemed like, shouldn't everybody already know this? I mean, it's not like secret. These people are just brutalizing, raping, and demolishing an entire country.
Well, in the U.S., we had embedded foreign war correspondents, which basically meant there was like Geraldo Rivera's and other people like that were just hanging out with the Marine Corps and the Army while they were killing people.
I used to call them embedded.
Sorry?
I used to call them in bed with instead of embedded.
That's fair.
And so collateral murder was the first, to me, I was like maybe 18 when it came out, was the first real view of what our wars were to me. And I feel like it was that way for a lot of people on the internet at that time when those videos came out, because we were already 8 years removed, more or less 7 years removed, when those videos came out about the wars happening and what was going on.
I mean,
I feel like that's why it had such an impact.
The news suppression when that stuff happened it didn't exist. Like, I didn't know about that until collateral murder.
So during the Vietnam War, we sent reporters over, and they actually covered the war, and they showed U.S. soldiers being shot and maimed, and they showed the actual face of war, and it had such an impact on the American people that they went, we don't want you to do that anymore. And a lot of them got shot for saying that. But what it changed was the media would never show you the real face of war ever again. And that has been since like 1975. So if you want to look at it in terms of it that way, it had been 4 decades since the American public had seen a member of the military do something other than be a hero. Like, I'm not kidding. That's how overly propagandized we've been. But so when Collateral Murder dropped, it broke some fucking people's brains because it had been so far removed in our history that you had to, like, you would literally have to go out of your way to find any sort of semi-accurate representation of war in the US media, period, for 40 years.
I suppose I didn't see it that way. Like, I didn't see, because my perception was I was also exposed to Middle Eastern sources.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why I thought, well, this is common knowledge. Like, it's just one video out of thousands of videos that I've seen that show the same thing. I mean, there was one where there was like a double tap where the double tap strategy where like you destroy some place and then people come in to help other people and then you bomb that as well. I mean, there was photographs of like children who were missing half of their bodies, like the lower part of their bodies were separated from their legs, and I saw that. Like, I saw the result of that. I saw it was the boy who lost his arms, and they basically just disintegrated and his whole entire family died. There was one where they were stitching, like, this is a start at the beginning of Shock and Awe, where they were just stitching a kid's skull. I guess I've seen things even bloodier than Collateral Damage. So perhaps because I was exposed to Middle Eastern sources, so I never knew what an impact that had on the US. But it just goes to show you, like, for me, watching Collateral Damage, I didn't even think it was that bad. Like, I have seen so much gore over the years that I thought, oh, okay, it's just like, it's black and white. You don't even see the color of the blood. So it just goes to show you how sheltered and controlled your media is. That even that one instance of just one war crime was too much to handle.
Yeah, I can tell you, Steve's absolutely right when he says that we are the most propagandized nation on earth. That is absolutely accurate. And he's also right that, for 40 years, the people in this country really have no idea what goes on in war. And they are only shown the, football game, carrying the flag, national anthem, baseball and apple pie version of an American
Or it's Saving Private Ryan, but it's in a historical context. And there's a unspoken, like, almost agreement that the audience gives going into that film is that, well, this is no longer the way we do war. We have drones now, and shit like that. Like, I mean, this is real shit. I'm glad we're having this conversation. I wish we could pull Danny Sherson in for a minute. I'm totally running this by that guy. But it's insane to think about, because almost everyone has a relative that's been in the military, or has themselves, like, there's somebody in their lives that has been in them that could give them an honest assessment of
they don't even talk
what
about
we
it
do
most
and
of the
did.
time.
Huh?
I mean, I come from a military family. Everyone in the military, they don't talk about it, period. At all. Even to family. Like, it's crazy.
That's fair. I've done a lot of like volunteer stuff at various VAs.
No, I'm
because
glad.
I think for a lot of people who come out of
out,
the war,
but yeah, but as a whole, they don't. They don't want to talk about it.
I think it depends. I think it depends. Like, there are some, they don't talk about their experiences, but I think that there are also people who are now very much aware of what they were doing when they were serving, and I think that they feel bad about it and ashamed of their part in it, and I think that that's hard to come to terms with.
Except
that's a different thing to accept.
Crenshaw, the Cyclops. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I mean it goes it goes a couple of different ways. Either you just bury that shit and fucking get on with your life and you go be a cop or a security guard or something and you punch your kids every day and then you blow your brains out when you're 45 or 48, or your career and you're never leaving ever, or you end up like Adam Kokesh or Mike Preisner or any of the other just millions at this point veterans for peace who saw what it was all about. Apparently did not have access to Smedley Butler's book before boot camp, but after, certainly with a better understanding that war is a racket.
I wanted to, on that point, because of this, the millions of civilians that died in the Middle East throughout these wars, multiple nation destroying wars. I thought it's a very interesting juxtaposition about how WikiLeaks is trying to stop these things from happening versus the accusation that the leaks actually hurt people. And I find it hilarious, in fact, that the lives of millions of civilians in the Middle East are basically seen as completely worthless, and don't even talk about them. Don't talk about the war crimes. That was the first day of the trial, and compared to, oh, he put the lives of informants and CIA agents at risk, which, first of all, they can't even prove that that's the case.
Well, and it's also not a crime.
Yeah, it's also not a crime because it's not a publisher's responsibility to protect the secrecy of the agents. It's not. It's the journalists. Their job is to inform people, and if they have leaks, then they should blame themselves. And I also just think that no, it doesn't compare. Like the lives of the informants and the CIA agents do not compare to the millions of people that died in the war, Middle Easterners and soldiers and American soldiers. So I think that it's this very stupid defense of war crimes to make that statement that, oh, he put informant and CIA agents' lives at risk.
And
it's so mind-boggling to me that we're talking about Julian Assange in court and not the people who committed the war crimes.
right.
To the point that on Monday, right, the U.S. prosecution tried to deny the fact that the CIA had tortured people, and concierge of the State Department, QC Vanessa Breitster, she said that we are not here to determine if anyone was tortured, and we will not make a determination on that. To which point I believe it was raised that she didn't have to, that there was a Senate Intelligence Committee torture report that could simply be entered in, and she said no.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
You put the war crimes on trial, right? But isn't that rather the point? Because at the end of the day, this is about people's lives, right? That's the whole purpose. That's what the claims of the prosecutors are, that he put lives at risk. And if this is about people's lives, then that should also be entered into the defense.
Well, so John Kiriakou, who blew the whistle on the torture program back in 2007, what he was actually charged with was revealing the name of an agent. When he was speaking with his lawyer, when they got to the Eastern District of Virginia court, which is where Julian Assange would be if he's, broad daylight kidnapped and brought here, he was like, I get my day in court. I get to tell everybody what happened. And his lawyer goes, you dumbass. This isn't about justice or your day in court. This is about mitigating damage. And that is all that John as a human being was seen as. Damage to be mitigated. There is no difference between what happened to John and what is currently happening to Julian Assange. It's why they went from their opening salvo was Julian Assange isn't a journalist. He can't be a journalist. And then witness after witness testified to the fact that, yes, he was, in fact, a journalist. And they switched to, okay, he's a journalist, but the United States has the right to prosecute journalists. Now, we can now charge journalists under the Espionage Act because, fuck it, we said so. And they got a fair amount of shit for that as well. Both by the defense witnesses and in a lot of at least European press outlets kind of picked up on that and were like, hey, the US thinks they can prosecute any journalist, any from anywhere on the planet, anywhere. So they pulled back from that, and that's when they started going after this. You release the name of informants, which again is not a crime in the United States.
And that actually got the releasing the names of the informants. That's what was argued. I don't know if it was Friday or yesterday, but it literally got to the point. That was one of the times where a witness said, "I'm glad you asked that question," because the witness knew the timeline better than the prosecution, to the point that they held up court 15 minutes to do time zone conversions. And Judge Vanessa Baratzer and the U.S. prosecution were both forced to acknowledge that David Lee, in publishing the keys to the encrypted emails, was the one who released them first, essentially saying that they're going to be charging David Lee under the Espionage Act for releasing Cablegate.
The Guardian journalist?
Yep.
Yes.
So they have already said now in court that, and this is just if their rules continue to apply the way that they do, that David Lee is next, that he was the one that released Cablegate. That is now accepted fact in court. And now they can't even say that WikiLeaks was the one that released the name of informants.
It's a cute cat.
Daryl. He does this all the time.
The cat likes Julian Assange. So.
It's really annoying.
Should bring mine in.
We actually were owed a special vigil with Ron Placone in remembrance of Embassy Cat, because he has his cat Lucy.
Lucy.
We were supposed to do that back in December, but the world just went crazy.
Why is Embassy Cat okay?
It was just a like for fun thing, like trying to just have a lighter topic in a situation sort of thing. I don't know. I haven't seen any updates on Embassy Cat either way. But
I think the cat is with Stella, I believe. It's either with Stella or the lawyer, something like that.
Yeah.
I think it was with a lawyer for a while, and then I think it went to Stella.
Yep.
I think. I don't know. I
It's
could
alive.
maybe.
be really wrong.
No remembrance required. But yeah, it would
I
be
also
cool.
wanted to point out while I was in the middle of that ramble there that in Chelsea Manning's court-martial, the U.S. Army testified under oath that no one was harmed by any of her releases.
So that's back to the Guardian journalist that was actually responsible for releasing the password to the Cablegate, which resulted in the informants being exposed. So that proves that it wasn't Assange, number one, or it wasn't WikiLeaks. And therefore they can't prosecute for that. But are they going to go after the Guardian journalist?
No.
I bet you they won't. Because that's not really what this is about at the end of the day. They don't care about the performance. They don't care about people's lives at all. It's about the right to maintain their wars and shut people up about them. That's what it's about.
And the Guardian journalists pose no threat to them on
exactly.
that. Those are two well-known propagandists. You know, they're not a threat. Those are not journalists. So yeah, and that's why those people, those types, are not saying anything about what's happening to Julian, because they know that there's no threat. They're not a threat. They're not coming after them. That's not the kind of journalism they do. They're news readers. They don't do real stuff. So, you know, that's why I think it's important to get people like in independent media who should be speaking out and aren't, to speak out. Because, you know, Chris Cuomo and Rachel Maddow aren't going to do it.
So that's why I differentiated between pundits and journalists the other day, and people forget that the vast majority of people they see on YouTube or Rockfin or whatever are pundits. They're there to tell you their opinion about things, and they're not doing journalism. They're doing commentary. And so they won't necessarily be affected by this. Certainly not the way that, real life journalists are. And I know that the people who are pundits are aware that they're pundits, and that they're not journalists. And I don't know if they're callous enough, to like understand the reality of the situation and still be like, well, but there's an election going on, or whatever the content is based off of. I don't know, but I do know that if you are a working journalist right now and you are not screaming your head off about this, you are really, really missing the point.
I think for those people, I think they deserve to live in a country that will throw them in jail for saying anything, just about anything, because that's the country that they're working towards. Like, their silence is creating such a place. So yeah, it's pure cowardice and self-serving. And Australia is one of the biggest of that, I think, especially because this man is Australian, and they dare not say a word. It's really disgusting, if you ask me. I wouldn't call myself a journalist. I never have. I would say I'm like a pundit or an analyst, because I obviously have very strong views about things and opinions, and I'm not like on the ground investigating things. That's not what I am or what I do. But even I should feel threatened about someone telling me I can't say things. And yeah, like what you said is a fact. It's not a journalist's responsibility to protect the secrets of of these wars and of these informants. And there's no law for that, surely. So how can they prosecute on those terms? I don't really understand, since there's no law against publishing the names of CIA agents, as far as I know.
Well, here's the thing about the pundit and journalist thing. It doesn't matter if you're a pundit or a journalist. Every human being should be worried about this. It's going to affect us all. It's not just a matter of, can you still be an investigative journalist? It's, can you, as a citizen of the United States, know the truth about what your government is doing and hold them accountable? And we should all want to be able to do that. They're psychopaths. I don't want them running around with no transparency and nobody watching them and nobody holding them accountable or making them uncomfortable. Those people are nuts. I don't want that. So I don't care if you're, somebody who's barely into the news, if you're a pundit, if you have a YouTube show, if you're a teacher, if you're a plumber, this affects you, and it affects you in a very big way. And everybody has reason to be concerned about it.
Absolutely.
But Steve and I have to be up in 5 hours, roundabout, to cover the court trial. I would love to have you back on more. This was a wonderful conversation. But I want to thank you very much for joining us, Mimi. If you could, please give us your final thoughts. You have as much time as you need, and where people can find you.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on, guys. Like, it's a relief because I had all these thoughts and nowhere to put them. I just want to say final thoughts. Yes, WikiLeaks will go on without Assange, and we have a new editor. I guess you're saying his name is Kristen Hara. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. But in my experience, Julian is a very unique and important and special person. He has interacted with me on Twitter in the past, and I found that he was willing to hear out like my side of things, more so than he's basically has an open mind and isn't ideologically like brainwashed into one thing, and he is an asset that you cannot like. It's immeasurably precious. So he's irreplaceable. And the machine the cog might still turn, but it would be really a big loss if Julian isn't the guy steering the wheel. So I just want to say that he's a hero and a wonderful man, and I hope to see him free. And I would love to hang out with you guys again. And my Twitter is Partisan Girl. My Facebook is Syrian, or actually, my Facebook is also Partisan Girl or Syrian Partisan Girl. And my YouTube is Syrian Girl Partisan. I know that's really confusing. Sorry about that. So please, if you can follow me, that would be great. And I hope to see you guys.
Could you shout out your Vimeo too? Because you recently started taking some videos off of YouTube because of censorship. Could you let people know where to find you on Vimeo?
Find me, like, I'm gonna put them back, so don't worry about that. But I have BitChute as well. I won't take anything off of BitChute, and I'm Syrian Girl on BitChute.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you very, very much for joining us. My name is Andrew Smith. You can find me on Twitter at Andrew Zigman. Down in the description below, if you are still with us, there are 5 different calls to action. I'm not going to name all of them off because there's a bunch, but please take the time to send a bunch of those emails. It may not seem like the most effective thing, but most of these will be able to be pulled in Freedom of Information Act requests. If there does come a time where people request to see how many complaints that the court has gotten about their technology and what have you, as well as the pardon office. So I just would like to thank everybody for watching. Kimber, Josh, Daniel, Kendra, and my 2 co-hosts. You can find us on Twitter at action_4Assange. And you can check out all of our calls to actions, our DC protest schedule, and more on action4Assange.com.
And I am Misty Winston. You can find me on Twitter at Sarcasm Stardust. And I also have a show called Facts on the Ground with my friend Jesse. We have a new episode coming up this week. So yeah, check that out. Thanks for having me again, guys. It was really nice to meet you. This was fun. We should definitely have her back on. I think this would be a good conversation to continue for sure. So yeah, and just thanks everybody in the chat. You guys are awesome.
My name's Steve Poikin, and I host a show called Slow News Day, which Mimi, by the way, I would like to invite you on that show. I think that would be fun. I do, whenever I can, cover U.S. fuckery in Syria, and I've talked extensively with Vanessa Beeley about it, and yeah, I think it would be a good talk. You can find that on Rockfin, DLive, and YouTube. If you're looking for it on YouTube, type in Slow News Day Podcast into your search bar. I believe Lee Camp is on this Sunday. I'm not 100% sure if it's this Sunday or next Sunday yet, but I should know tomorrow-ish. If not, then Juan Passarelli will be on. So good things in the works, thanks to my co-hosts and to everybody else in the A4A crew, everyone who's been in DC holding that shit down, Mean Panda, and our new friend Christine. And yeah, man, thanks Sleepy Josh on the 1s and 2s. I fucking love you guys there in the chat. I have the best chat on YouTube, like hands down. That's why like 80% of them all have mod wrenches now. I guess I got a little high. And I made everybody a moderator.
You get a wrench. You get a wrench. You get a wrench.
Yeah, that happened. It did. So I will see you guys at the ass crack of dawn tomorrow. A little bit before, actually. It'll be 2:30 here in California. I love you guys. I do. I'll see you tomorrow. Good luck to us all.